It was late, and my friend's voice over the phone sounded completely hollowed out. The specific kind of exhaustion that comes from a job with a pristine title that impresses parents, but privately feels like it's slowly crushing your soul. He was spiraling, caught in one of those desperate monologues about purpose and meaning. But as he spoke, I wasn't really listening. I was architecting. My brain lit up with a sort of manic clarity. I had the blueprint right there in my head. Update the resume, email these 3 specific contacts, take that course we discussed 6 months ago. I could see his path out of misery with absolute precision. I was ready to be the hero, to deliver the 5-point tactical plan that would fix his life. I took a deep breath, opened my mouth to dispense this life-changing wisdom, and then I stopped. I forced myself to say absolutely nothing. I held back because I suddenly remembered a terrifying statistic about doctors' professionals trained to listen. Research shows that on average, a doctor interrupts a patient within just 11 seconds of them starting to speak. 11 seconds. That is the threshold of our patience before the urge to fix overpowers the need to understand.
We think we are being helpful, but that instant pivot to solution mode often signals something much darker to the other person. Incompetence. It suggests, I don't trust you to figure this out. That silence on the phone felt cruel at the moment, but it turns out that suppressing your hero instinct might be the only way to actually help. Today we are looking at why your most well-intentioned advice is likely backfiring, damaging your relationships, and actually preventing the people you love from solving their own problems.
That's such a relatable story. I mean, that feeling, that pressure to jump in and solve it, it's almost a reflex, isn't it?
It's completely a reflex. You feel like you're failing your friend if you don't give them the answer.
Exactly. And that's what we're really getting into in this deep dive. We're looking at the psychology behind that reflex, but also the organizational fallout.
Right.
We've got some fascinating sources that cut across, interpersonal psychology, corporate management studies, even cross-cultural communication.
And they all kind of point to the same slightly uncomfortable truth.
They do. That sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is, well, nothing, just listen. That non-directive support is way more powerful than any 5-point plan you can cook up.
Okay, so let's start there with that impulse, this hero instinct, as we're calling it. Why is it so powerful? Why is it so hard to just sit in silence and listen?
Well, part of it is genuine. It comes from a good place. You see someone you care about, a friend, a partner, a colleague, and they're struggling. You don't want to see them in pain.
Of course. The impulse is to alleviate their suffering.
Absolutely. But, and this is the tricky part, there's an ego component mixed in there, a big one.
Oh, okay.
We start to believe that our specific experience, our wisdom, is like a cheat code for their problem.
I've been through this before, so I know the answer.
Precisely. I can get you through this faster. I can shortcut your struggle. And that feels good. It feels heroic.
It feels powerful.
Yeah.
It positions you as the one with the answers.
And that's the core of the psychological irony right there. The intention is so pure, but the impact can be really damaging, or at the very least, just totally ineffective.
Which is why we have to draw a really bright line at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
We need to distinguish between 2 totally different things.
Yes. There's solicited advice.
Where someone looks you in the eye and says, okay, what do you think I should do? They're literally inviting you in.
Right. That's partnership.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other side, the much, much riskier territory of unsolicited advice.
That's the sentence that starts with, you know what you should do.
Mm-hmm. And the moment you say that, you've stepped onto a minefield. You've become an interloper, not a guide.
And this is where it all starts to backfire. We've identified, 6 big psychological reasons this happens?
At least 6, yeah. And they all build on each other. The first one, and you could argue it's the most immediate and damaging, is what it does to the other person's ego.
The blow to the ego. Or, as the research puts it, the implication of incompetence.
I mean, think about the subtext. When you offer advice that wasn't asked for, you are sending a very clear, if unspoken, message.
And that message is, I don't think you can handle this on your own.
Exactly. You're not smart enough or strong enough or capable enough to figure this out for yourself.
I see this happen all the time in meetings. Someone will be methodically walking the team through a really complex problem they've been wrestling with for days.
Laying out all the context, all the nuance.
Yes, and before they could even get to the end, someone will jump in with this incredibly simplistic solution. Why don't you just call Dave in accounting?
Right, and it just sucks the air out of the room.
Because the implication is, you've been struggling for 3 days with something that I just solved in 5 seconds. You must not be very competent.
It's subtly infantilizing. It treats the other person like a child who can't manage their own affairs.
There's this one anecdote I read that's an extreme example, but it makes the point so perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
It's about someone who survived a really traumatic experience, like getting caught in a riptide at the beach.
Okay.
So they've just fought for their life, used every ounce of strength and instinct they have to get back to shore. They're processing this immense trauma and, this incredible feat of survival.
And they're probably feeling this mix of terror and relief and pride even.
Exactly. And the first thing someone on the beach says to them is, you're supposed to swim parallel to the shore, not against the current.
Oh, that's brutal.
It's horrifying,
Yeah.
right? The person just demonstrated incredible capability. And the immediate response is a critique of their competence. It completely invalidates the entire experience.
It's an attack on their agency at the very moment they proved they had it. Which actually leads perfectly into the second reason this backfires.
Okay.
It's about creating unequal footing. It creates a power imbalance.
Because the act of giving advice, by its very nature, isn't a conversation between equals.
No, it inherently positions the giver as the one with superior knowledge, the one who knows best.
And the recipient is, the one who's lacking, the one who's needy.
The one who needs to be saved. And that subtle shift in the power dynamic is where resentment starts to grow. You expect gratitude, but what you often get is this slow-burning resentment.
There's a name for the bias that fuels this, isn't there? I think it's egocentric discounting.
Yes, that's it. Egocentric discounting. It's a cognitive trap that we all fall into.
So break that down. What's happening in our brains?
Okay, so the advice giver, let's say that's you. You instinctively overvalue your own solution. You think, my plan for my friend's career is brilliant. It has like a 90% chance of success.
Right, because it's my idea, so it must be good.
Of course. But at the same time, you're undervaluing the other person's ability to come up with their own solution. So you might rate their capacity to solve it themselves at, say, 50%.
So in my own head, the math is totally skewed. I'm the brilliant savior, and they're just floundering.
Exactly. You've mentally created that power imbalance before you even open your mouth. It's a kind of unconscious arrogance, really.
And when someone feels like they're being positioned as lesser or incompetent, that triggers our third huge barrier.
The threat to autonomy and control.
This one feels primal. I mean, nobody likes being told what to do.
Nobody. We're wired with this deep, deep desire for self-determination. We need to feel like we're in the driver's seat of our own lives.
And unsolicited advice can feel like a direct challenge to that. It's not guidance, it's a takeover attempt.
That's a great way to put it, a takeover attempt. It's perceived as an attempt to control your choices, to undermine your independence.
And that threat is so powerful that it can make people do things that are objectively against their own self-interest.
That's psychological reactance in a nutshell. People will actively reject perfectly good, objectively sound advice simply to reassert their autonomy.
This is the classic teenager and the curfew.
It's the perfect example. The curfew might be completely reasonable, say 11 p.m. on a school night. There's no logical reason to fight it.
But they will. They'll break it, not because they want to stay out later, but because they have to prove a point.
The point being, you do not control me. I am in charge of my own life.
I see this in the workplace, too. A boss mandates some new, slightly annoying process without asking for any input. And suddenly you see people finding these little ways to quietly sabotage it. Not because the process is bad, but because they need to reclaim some sense of control over their work.
It's so important to get this. The actual merit of the advice becomes irrelevant.
Totally secondary.
If it violates that core need for agency, it's going out the window. It doesn't matter if it was a perfect solution that would have saved them a year of struggle. It will be rejected.
So, okay. The advice implies incompetence. It creates a power imbalance, and it threatens our autonomy. But what happens when the advice giver is someone really close to you, like a partner or a best friend?
Well, that's when we get to our fourth point, and this is where things can get really toxic. The advice is often interpreted as criticism.
And that's poison in a close relationship.
It really is. And the reason it feels so much like criticism is because of a concept in psychology called overlapping selves.
Okay, what does that mean?
In really interdependent relationships, marriages, long-term partnerships, deep friendships, we start to integrate the other person into our own sense of identity.
So their successes feel a bit like my successes.
And their choices become part of what psychologists call the us unit. Your identity and my identity start to, overlap.
I get it. So if my partner gives me unsolicited advice on, say, how I'm handling a conflict at work.
It doesn't just feel like a helpful tip about a work problem.
No, because of our overlapping selves, it feels like a direct criticism of my judgment, or even a criticism of us as a unit, that we aren't handling things correctly.
Exactly. It's a personal attack on your core competence and, by extension, on the health of the relationship itself.
And people have very strong defenses against that kind of perceived attack.
You bet they do. You don't get gratitude for that. You get a wall. You get defensiveness. You get an argument.
And if that pattern repeats over and over again, you land on reason number 5.
Relationship erosion and indebtedness.
Yeah, this is the long-term damage. This isn't just one bad conversation. It's the cumulative effect of many.
We have this assumption that any support is better than no support.
Yeah.
But the research just flat out contradicts that.
Right. Even if the advice is well-intentioned but unhelpful, it creates this weird unspoken strain.
It's a subconscious feeling of indebtedness. Even if you didn't want the advice, even if it was bad advice, there's this part of you that feels like you now owe them something.
You have to perform gratitude.
You have to perform gratitude. That's it. It's emotional labor. You have to say thank you for something that actually made you feel worse. And that creates this invisible strain on the trust in the relationship.
And this is where we get to that one data point from the marital satisfaction studies that is just, it's shocking.
It is. It's a showstopper. The studies found that providing too much informational support, which is just a clinical term for advice giving, is actually worse for long-term relationship satisfaction than providing no support at all.
Let's just sit with that for a second. It is better to do nothing than to give your partner a 5-point plan to fix their problem.
Better to say nothing. Because when you jump to the fix, you are fundamentally misreading the situation.
You think they need a solution.
But what they actually need is emotional validation. They need empathy. They need to feel heard and seen. And what they got instead was a lecture that made them feel incompetent and indebted.
You've not only failed to meet their real need, you've actively harmed the relationship in the process.
Which brings us pretty cleanly to our 6th and final reason, which is sort of the inevitable conclusion of all the others.
Simple ineffectiveness.
After all of that, the ego blow, the power struggle, the threat to autonomy, the perceived criticism, the person on the receiving end is just not going to take the advice.
They're going to reject it outright.
Almost every time. So your brilliant, heroic plan to save them from themselves, it's completely useless.
And worse than useless, because now you've added another layer of complexity to their problem.
How so?
Well, now, on top of their original issue, they also have this new social problem of having to manage your feelings and gracefully reject your solution.
You're right. It just makes everything more complicated.
It's a totally negative-sum game. The hero swoops in, makes the situation worse for everyone, and then flies away wondering why nobody is grateful.
It's a complete failure on every level.
Okay, so we have a really clear picture of why the hero instinct fails. It's built on a flawed psychological foundation.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative? If we can't be the hero, what are we supposed to be?
The alternative requires a pretty fundamental paradigm shift. We have to move away from the idea of helping, which we've defined as fixing the problem for them.
Which, as we've seen, often creates dependency.
Exactly. And we need to move toward the idea of supporting. And supporting is about creating the conditions for them to solve the problem for themselves. It's about fostering self-determination.
The goal isn't to give them the answer, it's to help them find their own.
Yes. It's helping them tap into and trust what you might call their inner teacher. Everyone has one. It's that inherent wisdom and resilience that gets clouded by stress and confusion.
It sounds like we're moving into the world of non-directive coaching or person-centered therapy.
We are. The philosophy is rooted in that work, especially the work of psychologist Carl Rogers. The fundamental belief is that the person you're supporting, your friend, your employee, your client, already has the seeds of the solution within them.
So our job isn't to plant a new tree, it's to be the soil and the water.
That's a perfect metaphor. You're there to create a nourishing environment, not to dictate the direction of growth.
Rogers had a very specific framework for what this kind of profound listening actually entails. It's not passive, it's a very active process.
It is. He identified 3 unobservable but causally related constructs that are the mechanics of real support.
Let's go through them. The first one is attention, which sounds simple, but it's not.
It's not simple at all. It means giving your complete, total, non-judgmental focus to what the other person is saying. It requires you to actively silence your own inner monologue.
And that's the hardest part, right? Because as we said at the start, My brain immediately starts architecting a solution. It's rehearsing my response while the other person is still talking. How do you shut that down?
It takes conscious discipline. A practice some people use is called beginner's mind. You have to force yourself to listen as if you know absolutely nothing about the topic, as if every word they say is a brand new piece of data.
You're constantly fighting your own assumptions.
You're fighting the urge to categorize and solve. One really practical tip is to just make a mental rule for yourself.
Yeah.
I will not form an opinion or a solution for the next 5 minutes.
That's good. It's like putting a time lock on the hero instinct.
Exactly. It buys your brain enough time to actually absorb what's being said, and that leads to the second construct,
Which is comprehension.
And again, this is much deeper than just understanding the words they're using. Real comprehension means you are successfully adopting the speaker's entire frame of reference, their cognitive and their emotional frame.
So it's true empathy.
It's true empathy. You're not just feeling sorry for them. You're working to understand the world as they see it.
Including all their personal history, their fears, their biases that are coloring how they see this problem.
Precisely. So with your friend who hates his job, it's not enough to understand that he needs a new resume. You need to understand why the thought of another job interview fills him with a specific kind of dread.
Maybe it connects back to a really bad experience he had a decade ago that he's never gotten over.
Right. You have to understand his context, not just his content. And once you have that attention and that deep comprehension, you can move to the third and most powerful construct.
Benevolent intention.
And the key here, as you said before, is that the intention has to be completely without judgment.
Your only goal is their growth.
Your only goal is to help them grow psychologically, gain their own insights, and solve their own problems. You become what Rogers called a confident companion.
I like that term. A confident companion.
It means you're just there. You're steady, you're present, and you're trusting their process. You are simply witnessing their struggle, and that act of witnessing is infinitely more powerful than trying to fix it.
That distinction, witnessing versus fixing, is everything. And the benefits are massive, especially when you see it applied in a leadership or a workplace context.
Huge. A coaching approach like this builds capacity, whereas the old advice-giving model just builds dependency.
So when a manager uses non-directive support, when they ask questions instead of giving orders,
Questions like, what's one thing that's in your control right now? Or what would this look like if it were easy?
right, they're not just solving the immediate problem. They are actively training that employee's muscles for critical thinking, for problem solving, for agency.
You are turning them from a needer into a solver. And crucially, when the solution comes from them, when it's their own idea born from their own reflection,
Their investment in the outcome goes through the roof.
it's exponential. They own the idea, so they own the execution. You never have to worry about their buy-in.
But this brings us to what I think is the most mind-bending piece of research in this whole area, the advice-giving effect.
It's so counterintuitive, isn't it?
It completely flips the script. We assume that getting advice is what helps people. But the studies show the exact opposite.
It's giving advice that boosts confidence and motivation.
Okay, let's walk through the mechanism here because it's wild. So if I'm feeling stuck and unmotivated about a goal,
Let's say saving more money.
okay, I'm stuck on my savings goal. The best way for you to help me is not to give me a budget plan.
Nope. The best thing I can do is ask you, hey, what advice would you give your best friend if they were struggling with this exact same savings problem?
And the act of formulating and dispensing that advice to a hypothetical friend, that's what makes me feel more capable.
That's exactly what the research shows, because being asked for advice sends an incredibly powerful subconscious signal.
The signal is you are competent.
You are knowledgeable, you are a resource.
Yeah.
It immediately boosts your sense of self-efficacy, and that feeling inspires you to live up to the expectation you just set for your friend. It's a brilliant psychological hack.
That's a game changer for any manager. If you have a team member who's struggling, don't tell them what to do. Ask them to advise a junior colleague on a similar task.
You're giving them the gift of feeling competent, and that feeling is the most powerful motivator there is.
And it's a great tool for yourself, too. If you're stuck, just externalize it. Ask, what would I tell my smartest friend to do right now?
It creates just enough distance to see the problem clearly. And this isn't just theory. This is backed up by hard data from organizational research, especially around employee health.
Right. We have to make a clear distinction between the two types of support seen in the workplace.
Okay, so first you have directive social support. This is your classic command and control management style. The boss takes all the responsibility, tells you exactly what to do, what to think, what to feel.
The statement on an employee survey that captures this perfectly is, "My supervisor solves problems for me."
And the outcomes associated with that style are just grim.
They're awful. Higher rates of depression, more loneliness, more physical health complaints like back pain and migraines.
Reduced self-esteem and, of course, increased dependency on the boss. It creates a learned helplessness.
So the directive style might solve the immediate task, but it creates this massive internal stress by stripping away the employee's sense of control.
That's the perfect summary. Now contrast that with non-directive social support.
This is where the employee keeps control of the process. The manager is an empathetic partner.
The survey statement for this one is so simple but so powerful. It's just, my supervisor shows interest in how I'm doing.
Just that. Not solves my problems, but shows interest.
And the results are a mirror image of the other style. Consistently higher job satisfaction, fewer physical health complaints, and this is the most important part, a significantly heightened sense of job control, a sense of agency.
So it's not just a nice to have. This management style has tangible, measurable physical health benefits. People are literally healthier because they trusted trusted and empowered.
Because this approach addresses what the researchers call the intrapsychic challenges. It's not just about the external problem, it's about the internal need for self-worth, for belonging, for competence. Directive support ignores all of that.
You can't separate performance from psychology. If you want a resilient, high-performing team, you have to support the whole person, not just the task list.
And this idea is the absolute bedrock of what we now call team psychological safety.
This has become a huge buzzword in the corporate world, so let's be really precise about what it means. It's not just about everyone being nice to each other.
No, absolutely not. Psychological safety, by its formal definition, is a shared belief within a team that it is safe for interpersonal risk-taking.
So it's the belief that I can stick my neck out and not get my head chopped off.
That's it. It's the confidence that the team won't embarrass you, reject you, or punish you for speaking up.
For admitting a mistake, for asking a stupid question, for challenging the status quo.
All of those things. And you're right to distinguish it from group cohesiveness.
Yeah.
A cohesive team that just wants to maintain harmony can be very dangerous. It leads to groupthink.
Right. Nobody wants to rock the boat. Psychological safety is the opposite. It's the safety to rock the boat.
Because the biggest fear in any workplace is looking incompetent. People will hide mistakes, they will avoid asking for help, all because they're terrified of looking stupid. PS is the antidote to that fear.
And the research is crystal clear that psychological safety is the engine of learning behavior on a team.
It is. Learning behavior includes all those risky things we just mentioned. Seeking feedback, sharing information, asking for help, talking about errors, experimenting. Without PS, none of that happens. The team stagnates.
So the chain of causality is clear. Psychological safety leads to learning behavior, and learning behavior leads to high performance.
Exactly. And one study found something fascinating. They compared team efficacy, which is the team's belief in its own ability to do the job, with psychological safety.
Okay.
And they found that psychological safety was the stronger predictor of learning behavior.
Wow. So let me get this straight. The fear of being shamed by my teammates is a bigger obstacle to learning than my actual lack of confidence in our skills.
That's what the data suggests. The interpersonal fear is the primary barrier that has to be removed first.
And where does that safety come from? That's to start at the top, right?
It almost always traces back to the leader. The two biggest drivers of PS are team leader coaching and providing what's called context support, giving the team the resources and information they need.
But it's the leader's behavior that sets the tone.
Day in, day out. If the leader is supportive, asks questions, and this is critical, has non-defensive responses to bad news or challenges, the team learns that it's safe.
But if a leader is authoritarian, punitive, shoots the messenger.
Learning shuts down overnight, and we have these incredible qualitative examples from the research that paint a really vivid picture of this.
Let's talk about the good example first. They called it the high-learning stain team.
Right, this was a manufacturing team. And their process sometimes created defects, which they called stains or drips.
Okay.
And this team had incredibly high psychological safety. So when one team member pointed out a mistake, another had made a drip, it wasn't taken as a personal attack.
The quotes from the team members are amazing. One of them said that when someone points out an error, they don't think they want to put us down.
Instead, they believed they want to work together to make the product better.
That one little shift in assumed intent, that's everything.
It's the whole game. They started from a place of positive intent. And because of that, they could constantly give and receive feedback. They could learn and adapt on the fly. The interpersonal safety allowed them to be interdependent and effective.
Okay, now let's contrast that with the nightmare scenario, the low-learning publications team.
A completely different story. Here, the leader managed by assigning tasks to individuals and keeping them siloed.
So there was no collaboration from the start.
None. And the study found a total absence of learning behavior. People weren't asking questions, they weren't sharing information, they certainly weren't giving each other honest feedback.
Why not?
Because they felt completely unheard by the leader. They knew that if they spoke up, the response would be defensive, demeaning, or punitive. The risk was just too high.
So they just shut down.
They shut down. They coped by either working in total isolation, just keeping their head down, or by actively looking for other jobs.
It created this self-sealing death spiral.
That's a great way to describe it. They were trapped in a low-learning, low-performance state, and the lack of psychological safety meant there was no way out.
It just makes the cost of that directive hero style of leadership so stark. It doesn't just hurt morale. It grinds performance to a halt and pushes your best people out the door.
And this whole dynamic, this whole delicate dance of support and advice, it gets even more complicated when you zoom out and look at it on a global scale.
Right, because advice giving is a cultural minefield. This is where we get into face negotiation theory.
Which sounds academic, but it's actually very intuitive. Face is just a metaphor for our public self-image. It's how we want to be seen and respected by others.
And certain actions can be a face-threatening act or an FTA.
And unsolicited advice is a classic FTA because it directly threatens at least two of the core face domains.
The first one we've already talked about a lot, autonomy. The need to be seen as independent and not imposed upon.
Unsolicited advice stomps all over that. The second one is competence. The need to be seen as intelligent, skilled, and capable.
And advice, as we've established, carries the subtext that you are incompetent. So it's a double whammy face threat.
It is. And how big that threat is depends enormously on the culture you're operating in, particularly around the idea of power distance.
Power distance is basically how much a culture accepts and expects inequality and hierarchy.
Right. So in large power distance cultures, places like Japan, Mexico, many countries in the Middle East hierarchy is respected. You don't question your elders or your superiors publicly.
So in that context, giving unsolicited advice up the chain to your boss would be a massive face-threatening act. It would be seen as incredibly disrespectful.
A career-limiting move, for sure. But in small power distance cultures, think Sweden, Denmark, Israel society is much more egalitarian.
People are seen as equals, and feedback flows more freely in all directions.
Exactly. Giving your boss a suggestion in Stockholm is often seen as just a helpful exchange of information. It doesn't carry the same threat to their face.
And the other big cultural axis here is individualism versus collectivism.
So you have individualistic cultures like the US or Germany, which are all about the I. Personal achievement, independence, speaking your mind.
And then collectivistic cultures like Japan or South Korea, which are focused on the we. Group harmony, duty, interdependence.
And in those collectivistic cultures, you find a very strong sense of what's called relational concern.
Which is a reluctance to do anything that might disrupt the harmony of the group.
Or cause anyone, yourself or the other person, to lose face. So people are very hesitant to ask for help because that's an admission of weakness that could burden the group.
And they're also hesitant to offer help because they don't want to embarrass the other person by implying they need it.
It's this mutual dance of trying to protect everyone's face. Which brings us to this really elegant cross-cultural study comparing American and Japanese participants.
And it really zeroed in on the key variable, which is solicitation, whether or not the help was asked for.
And the results were so clear. The cultural difference wasn't in the willingness to help. It was entirely in the willingness to offer unsolicited help.
So when the Japanese participants were presented with a scenario where a friend was struggling,
if the friend didn't ask for help, the Japanese participants were very hesitant to offer any. Less than half of them intervened.
The moment the friend explicitly asked, "What should I do?"
they were just as likely to jump in and offer support as their American counterparts. The willingness was there all along.
So the explicit request is the key. It's the social signal that it's now safe to offer support without threatening the other person's face.
It's a form of mutual rejection avoidance. The provider doesn't want to be rejected or cause embarrassment, so they wait for the green light. They are prioritizing the person's psychological well-being over solving the tangible problem.
Whereas the American participants, from a more individualistic culture,
They didn't hesitate. They jumped right in with unsolicited advice because the cultural concern about disrupting the relationship just wasn't as strong. The hero instinct is practically encouraged.
the takeaway for anyone working across cultures is huge. In a high relational concern culture, if you offer a solution before you are explicitly asked, you are not being helpful. You are being offensive.
You're committing a face-threatening act that can damage the relationship and your goals. You have to wait for the invitation.
It really brings everything full circle, doesn't it? Whether it's a one-on-one friendship, a marriage, a corporate team, or a diplomatic negotiation.
The mechanism of failure is the same every time. It's that rush to provide a fix that violates a deep human need for autonomy, for competence, for psychological safety.
And so the path to actually being helpful requires us to fight that instinct, to suppress the urge to be the hero.
The data we've looked at today is so consistent. This non-directive approach of deep listening and asking good questions,
Right.
It's not a soft skill. It is a fundamental driver of performance, of trust, of health, of creativity.
It's realizing that when you intentionally hold back, when you refuse to give the answer, you're not withholding help. You're actually giving a much bigger gift.
You're giving the gift of confidence, the gift of agency, the gift of self-discovery.
The real transformation happens when you stop seeing support as installing a temporary fix for someone.
And start seeing it as cultivating in them the permanent belief that they are competent and capable of facing their own challenges.
If the primary driver of team learning and personal growth is the safety to make mistakes and voice vulnerabilities, we must acknowledge that every time you resist giving unsolicited advice, you are not just being a better friend or leader, you are actively building the psychological safety required for the recipient to independently evolve beyond the current problem. That silent act of non-imposition is the ultimate investment in their long-term resilience.